To pull 15,000 tons of freight, a massive diesel locomotive relies on heavy forged steel. Inside the engine block, 60-pound pistons punch up and down nearly 1,000 times a minute. Right above them sit heavy steel exhaust valves. These valves are held in place by tiny metal clips called keepers. A keeper costs about $3. But machines do not just explode on their own, they are murdered. When a dispatcher ignores a mechanic's warning to replace a worn $3 clip, the physics turn deadly. The clip snaps. Because of the interference design, the valve has nowhere to go. The 60-pound piston smashes it at full speed. How does a $3 shortcut destroy a $2 million leviathan? And what happens when corporate greed forces heavy iron past its absolute breaking point? In the 10th place, the fatigued valve spring sets the stage for a chain of preventable destruction. The shop log shows it in black ink, measured free length 13.10 inches. The OEM specification is 13.5, plus or minus a quarter of an inch. This spring sat 4/10 of an inch below the minimum. The technician flagged the out-of-spec condition. The line says, minor wear, defer replacement. Management signed off. The locomotive returned to revenue service. No further inspection, no corrective action. A photograph from the shop floor captures the spring beside a steel ruler, coils collapsed, the free length irreversibly shortened. The dye-penetrant test reveals beach marks along the fracture surface, classic high-cycle fatigue. The load deflection curve, plotted against the OEM baseline, shows a 10% loss in preload. That reduction transfers the full impact load to the valve keeper. The keeper, a 2-ounce clip, is now forced to restrain the entire kinetic energy of the 60-pound forged piston. The interference design offers no forgiveness. The spring's fatigue is not silent, it is recorded, it is ignored. The evidence is time-stamped. Deferred maintenance is not an abstract policy. It is a signature on a shop order, a photograph of a ruined spring, and a valve keeper pushed past its tensile yield limit. The failure is not random. It is the first link in a chain forged by management's decision to gamble with steel. Number 9. The corroded keeper interface is a silent killer. Shop inspection records show micro-pitting along the mating surface between the valve keeper and the retainer groove. The documented pits measure less than 0.12 millimeters in diameter, but each one is a stress riser. Metallography images from the lab report reveal intergranular cracks radiating from these pits. The keeper alloy, specified as high nickel, 18 chromium molybdenum steel, exhibits localized corrosion at the shot-peened surface. Magnetic particle inspection confirms subsurface fissures beneath the oxide layer. The lubricant log shows a lapse of 19 days in scheduled application of high-temperature anti-corrosive grease. Management signed a deferral order that read, "Lubricant interval extended, no immediate action." The keeper, already weakened by micro-pitting, is left exposed to cyclic loading. Over tens of thousands of cycles, the reduced contact area concentrates stress at the corroded interface. Fatigue cracks propagate along the keeper shoulder. The final fracture occurs well below the nominal tensile yield limit. The result is a textbook case of corrosion-assisted cracking. The evidence is not theoretical. It is a shop inspection report, a metallograph, and a signature of deferral. The failure is not random. It is authorized neglect, written in pitted steel. 8th place. The bent pushrod is a geometry violation written in steel. Shop records show a measured deviation of 0.79 millimeters, well outside the original equipment manufacturer limit. The pushrod, designed to transmit pure axial force, now delivers a lateral load to the valve keeper. The witness marks on the valve face are asymmetric. The valve seat burns on one side, a clear sign of misalignment. The rocker ratio amplifies the side load, pushing the keeper into high cycle fatigue. The mechanic flagged the defect. The foreman wrote a recommendation for immediate replacement, citing the risk of keeper failure. The repair was deferred. Management signed the order to defer, noting no immediate leak. The unit returned to revenue service with a compromised pushrod, a fatigued keeper, and a valve face scarred by off-center contact. The interference design does not forgive. The keeper, a 2-ounce clip, is forced to contain both axial and lateral loads from a 60-pound forged piston. The result is predictable. The keeper fails, the valve drops, and the piston shatters. The paper trail shows the sequence: geometry error, mechanic warning, management deferral, catastrophic uncontained mechanical failure. Number 7. Improper keeper installation is not a mystery. It is a procedural failure, documented in the maintenance log and immortalized by a missing torque entry. The valve keeper, a 2-ounce forged steel clip, depends on precise seating geometry and calibrated torque to restrain the 60-pound forged piston below. The original equipment manufacturer mandates a specific torque value, 20 foot-pounds plus or minus 2. The shop floor photo shows the truth: a visible gap between the keeper and retainer. The technician's note reads, "Rushed install, keeper reused, no new part available." The work order lacks any torque stamp, no signature, no verification. The timestamp on the management approval is 11 minutes before the unit returned to revenue service. No second check, no inspection hold. The keeper, unseated and under-torqued, is now a loaded gun. The interference design offers no margin. At the first full power stroke, the keeper slips. The valve stem is released. The piston, moving at 30 meters per second, collides with the falling valve. The impact exceeds the tensile yield limit of the keeper alloy by a factor of 2. Catastrophic metallurgical fatigue follows. The result is uncontained mechanical failure: crankcase fragments, shattered piston crown, ruptured cylinder head. The evidence is not theoretical. It is a photograph of a gap, a missing torque log, and a technician's rushed note. The failure is not random. It is the direct result of management pressure to return the locomotive to service, regardless of the mechanical risk. The chain of causation is written in steel and signed in ink. Number 6. The rocker arm stud is the silent saboteur of the interference design. This is not a component that fails by chance. The stud and pivot define the path of every valve event. Their geometry is the axis about which the entire top-end kinematics revolve. When the stud begins to loosen, even by a fraction of a millimeter, the valve lift profile is altered. The cam's intended rise and fall are corrupted. Shop logs record recurring complaints: rocker pivot loose, audible clatter at 900 revolutions per minute, and deferred repairs because there was no immediate loss of power. The deferral is signed and the locomotive is returned to service. Fractography of the failed stud reveals a classic fatigue origin at the thread root. Beach marks radiate outward, each one a record of a running engine cycle. As the pivot geometry degrades, the valve acceleration spikes. The measured lift, once 9.2 millimeters, now registers 9.7 millimeters. That extra half millimeter is not a harmless tolerance. It multiplies the inertial load on the valve keeper, forcing the 2-ounce clip to absorb impact energies far above its tensile yield limit. The keeper is now exposed to both increased axial shock and lateral deflection. The evidence is forensic: a stud fractured at the thread root, a valve lift profile shifted outside original equipment manufacturer specification, and a recurring log of deferred maintenance. The result is a domino effect. Structural fatigue at the pivot leads to dynamic overload at the keeper. The 60-pound forged piston, moving at 25 meters per second, meets a valve head that is no longer perfectly timed. The outcome is uncontained mechanical failure, crankcase fragments, and a ruined prime mover. The chain begins with a loose stud, ignored by management, and ends with catastrophic destruction. The mathematics of failure are not negotiable. They are signed in steel and rubber-stamped by the corporate office. Number 5. Excessive valve guide wear is the silent architect of interference disaster. The original equipment manufacturer limit for stem-to-guide clearance is 0.15 millimeters. The shop log records 0.19 millimeters on Unit 710 G6 and 0.17 millimeters on Unit 710 G5. Both measurements exceed the wear threshold. Both are flagged for immediate replacement. Both units are returned to revenue service by dispatcher order. The mechanics report is clear. Valve guide wear 0.19 mm, replace guide and keeper immediately. The dispatcher memo, written the next day, overrules with 3 words: minor wear, defer. Borescope video captures the stem runout. The valve tilts under cam lift, swinging laterally in the worn guide. The measured tilt is 0.3 mm at full lift, double the safe window. The piston rises at 7 meters per second. The valve tip, no longer coaxial, enters the collision window. The probability of direct contact is now a function of clearance geometry, not random chance. Test rig data plots the contact curve, and as clearance passes 0.15 mm, the risk of interference spikes from negligible to near certain. The keeper endures a bending moment it was never designed to absorb. Fatigue accumulates at the root. The keeper snaps. The valve drops. The 60-pound forged piston meets a falling valve head. The result is internal destruction, shattered piston crown, ruptured cylinder head, fragments embedded in cast iron. The evidence is mathematical. The chain of causation is written in the clearance log, the borescope video, and the dispatcher's signature. Management deferred the mandated repair. The keeper failed exactly as the geometry predicted. The violence was not accidental, it was scheduled. Number 4. The valve stem microinclusion fracture is a silent saboteur, invisible to routine inspection. The keeper and retainer pass every dimensional check. The valve train operates within all original equipment manufacturer tolerances. There are no warning flags, no technician notes, no deferred maintenance order. But inside the stem, a flaw is growing. Scanning electron microscopy reveals the truth. A non-metallic inclusion, manganese sulfide, less than 80 microns across, was embedded in the steel during forging. The chemistry table from the metallurgical report lists 0.012% sulfur, well above the batch average. This is not a surface defect. It is a latent weakness, buried deep in the microstructure, immune to dye penetrant and magnetic particle inspection. The fracture mechanics are merciless. Every valve cycle, 1,200 per minute, loads the stem in tension and compression. The inclusion acts as a stress riser, amplifying the local strain by a factor of 3. Paris's law predicts the result. Crack growth accelerates with each cycle, invisible until the moment of failure. At 217,000 cycles, the inclusion triggers a brittle fracture. The valve stem snaps without warning. There is no time for intervention. The keeper and retainer are still intact. The interference design offers no forgiveness. The 60-pound forged piston rises at 27 meters per second. The falling valve head meets the piston crown inside a window of 320 microseconds. The kinetic energy at impact exceeds 1.6 kilojoules, enough to shatter the piston, rupture the cylinder head, and fragment the engine block. The scanning electron microscope image is a death certificate written in steel, bright inclusion, radial crack, sudden overload. The metallurgist's conclusion is explicit: failure initiated at the inclusion site with no prior evidence in the service record. This is not a random accident. It is a manufacturing defect, undetectable in the field, that transforms a flawless prime mover into a $2 million wreck. The mathematics are final. The violence is absolute. Coming to the top 3, the spring retainer material substitution is a crime written in procurement records and metallurgical cross-sections. The original retainer was specified as grade 4140 steel, quenched and tempered, case hardened to a minimum of 48 HRC, with a case depth of 0.8 millimeters. The shop received a shipment of non-OEM retainers, SKU, ending in 7B92, sourced from a low-cost vendor. The invoice line reads, material, carbon steel, heat treat per vendor standard. The lab report is damning. Hardness mapping shows the retainer lip at 36 HRC, 12 points below the OEM minimum. The case depth measures just 0.19 millimeters, a quarter of the required thickness. The fracture photo from the lab is final. Brittle cleavage across the retainer lip, no evidence of ductile yield. KIC, measured by a 3-point bend test, falls to 65 megapascals times the square root of meter, a value that guarantees catastrophic failure under cyclic load. The procurement record shows the cost saving, $3 per retainer, a savings of 40% over the OEM part. Management signed off. The retainer was installed untested into a prime mover designed to restrain a 60-pound forged piston moving at 30 meters per second. The interference design offers no margin. The retainer lip, under-specified and under-hardened, cracks on the second maintenance cycle. The valve keeper, now unsupported, is forced to absorb the entire spring load and piston impact. The result is deterministic. The keeper shears at the groove, the valve drops, and the piston is obliterated. The evidence is not theoretical. It is a hardness map, a procurement signature, and a fractured retainer lip. Management's cost-cutting decision transformed a $3 part into a $2 million uncontained mechanical failure. The mathematics are absolute. The outrage is justified. The mismatched aftermarket keeper is a crime of decimal points and corporate indifference. The dimensional inspection report is explicit. The keeper radius is 1.91 millimeters. The OEM specification is 2.00 millimeters plus or minus 0.02. That gap, 0.09 of a millimeter, cuts the contact area by nearly 10%. The invoice shows the aftermarket keeper was $3 cheaper than OEM. Management signed off. The shop order is stamped, install aftermarket per cost directive. The mechanic's note is blunt, incomplete seating, keeper does not fully engage retainer groove, risk of dynamic slip flagged. Contact area math is not theoretical. The OEM keeper, at 2.00 millimeters, provides a bearing area of 14.1 square millimeters. The aftermarket unit, at 1.91 millimeters, drops to 12.7 square millimeters. Under a spring preload of 15 kilonewtons. The local pressure spikes from 1060 to 1180 megapascals. The safety margin vanishes. The keeper is now a point contact, not a clamping surface. Every valve cycle hammers the reduced shoulder, pushing the 2-ounce clip toward its tensile yield limit. The fatigue clock accelerates. Microslips become macro cracks. The keeper's traceability is a dead end. No batch number, no heat treatment record, no assurance of core hardness. The mechanic flags the risk. Management ignores the warning. The result is deterministic. At 217,000 cycles, the keeper slips. The interference design offers no forgiveness. The 60-pound forged piston rises at full speed. The valve drops. The impact is immediate. The piston shatters, the cylinder head ruptures, fragments embed in cast iron. The cost difference, $3 per keeper, becomes $2 million in wreckage. The evidence is a dimensional report, a price sheet, and a mechanic's warning buried under a procurement signature. The violence is not random. It is engineered by neglect and signed in ink. And finally, in first place, the National Transportation Safety Board, uncontained mechanical failure, is a case study in preventable devastation. The evidence begins with the chain of custody log. A 2-ounce valve keeper tagged and photographed in the shop, its fracture surface exposed beneath the harsh glare of the lab micrograph. The keeper is a high nickel, 18 chromium molybdenum steel, specified at 1,100 megapascals tensile yield. The measured yield after failure was 560 megapascals. The metallurgical report labels the fracture origin as classic high cycle fatigue, propagated from a pit at the seat retainer interface. The micrograph shows striations radiating outward like a clock running out of time. The paper trail is not ambiguous. The foreman's log, time-stamped 1247 Coordinated Universal Time, records a clicking valve train. The dispatcher order, issued 15 minutes later, clears the locomotive for revenue service. The work order, MO202-60912, lists the engine serial E56789A. No inspection, no replacement. The internal corporate email preserved in the NTSB docket spells out the policy to defer top-end inspection until the next scheduled overhaul. The executive signature is legible. The cost spreadsheet in the investigation file quantifies the aftermath: $2 million in direct damage, a shattered piston, a ruptured cylinder head, and crankcase fragments scattered across the shop floor. The physics are inescapable. The interference design offers no margin. The 60-pound forged piston rises at 30 meters per second. The valve keeper, already weakened by deferred inspection, cannot restrain the spring load. The keeper snaps, the valve drops. The collision window is 300 microseconds. The kinetic energy at impact exceeds 1.6 kilojoules, enough to shatter the piston crown, fragment the engine block, and launch steel shrapnel through the crankcase. The lab photo captures a piston split along its axis, fragments embedded in cast iron, oil and coolant mixing in the wreckage. The chain of causation is written in steel, ink, and email. Management chose to defer the mandated inspection. The valve keeper failed at its fatigue limit. The result was not an accident. It was a deterministic, $2 million uncontained mechanical failure. The final call is not for more analysis. It is for policy change. The mathematics of failure do not negotiate. They only record the cost. Across every incident, the pattern is mathematical and merciless. A $3 valve keeper, neglected past its tensile yield limit, triggers uncontained mechanical failure in a $1 million prime mover. Interference design turns microscopic fatigue into catastrophic crankcase fragmentation. Management. Deferred mandated inspections. The forged piston never fails. Only the paper trail does. This is not random chance. It is engineered inevitability. Iron never forgives accounting errors. Tell me your thoughts in the comments.